All right, welcome back. It is the Vegas Take, Sharp and Shapiro. Glad you could join us. Going to continue this conversation. UNLV Hoops hiring a new basketball coach, and his name is TJ Otzelberger. I think I've almost called him TJ Roethlisberger a few times. But the guy they have with us on the line right now, very lucky to have him on. He was UNLV's former athletic director for close to 4 years. Jim Livengood joining us right now on the KDWN hotline. Jim, I appreciate you taking some time. How are you?
I'm doing great, Brian and JD. Great to talk to you guys.
Thank you.
Happy Wednesday.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Happy Hump Day. We got a lot to get to. We got a lot to get to with you, Jim. And the first thing I want to do is get your reaction on UNLV's hire. I've been a little critical of it. Okay, I've been honest about it. I wasn't a huge Dave Rice guy. Wasn't a huge Marvin Menzies guy. I was a huge Kruger guy. And this hire to me seems to be a little bit of panic mode. We need to get somebody right away, and then there's other guys in the wings like an Eric Musselman or a Larry Eustace or even a Mike Miller, who I think the fans would have embraced. So what's your opinion on this hire? What do you think of this guy, TJ Otzelberger? What do you think about the decision of Francois?
Well, you know what? I'm in an awkward position there, Brian. I'm sure you understand that. Having been an AD as long as I was at 3-4 different schools now, it's a hard thing. Hiring coaches is a tough thing. It's a tough sell and it's a tough buy, and it's everything looks good on hiring day. Everything looks good in the press conference, but then it's how things translate. It's obviously left column. It's the amount of wins. It's obviously the fan engagement, the attendance, and all those kind of things. I don't know TJ. I know of him because I have a lot of friends who he's worked for and with and things like that. And in a lot of ways, he's relatively young in his career. So it's hard to say how this. I'm hoping for Desiree that this works out great. I'm actually more than Desiree. I'm hoping for UNLV and Las Vegas because, Brian, you guys understand this as well or better than anybody. This is a different time in Las Vegas. It's a whole different time than it was 5 years ago, certainly 10 years ago. And I'm not even talking about the Tark era. I'm talking about just the pro element, which is a great thing for Vegas, but this is a different time in terms of the college aspect. So it needs to be good, and I think right now the great news is he's undefeated.
That's true. Chris Beard was undefeated as UNLV's head coach, too, so you're right about that. If you're just joining us, Jim Livengood, former UNLV athletic director. You know, one thing I'll say, Jim, is that when you were here, man, the fan support was fantastic, wasn't it? The Thomas and Mack was rocking. Now you're looking at 3,000, 4,000 fans. So let me ask you this question. If you're struggling, and again, I know this is a tough question for you to answer, but if you're struggling with the fan support, right, you got 3,000 or 4,000 fans showing up to games, do you think that the fans will show up with this hire? Or would you have thought to yourself, well, you know what? Maybe we need somebody like a Mike Miller with some NBA experience. That's a name. That's the $1 million question, right? Or I should say the $1.4 million question, because I heard that's what they're going to be paying TJ on a yearly basis. What do you make of that situation with the fan support and trying to get people to fill the seats? Because that's a tough thing to do.
I think that is the big question. I think the two things, Brian and JD, the two things right now that really come to front is the attendance thing is obviously an issue, but the most immediate thing is keeping the roster, having some ability to have the roster come over, and all of those things play into to what's going to happen and going forward. And obviously we were very blessed. I was going to be here for 2 years. That was the game plan after Arizona. That was what my wife and I had agreed to, and all those things, and ended up staying 2.5. And we were blessed. Part of that is obviously I'd known Lon a long time. Lon did a great job, and quite candidly, I felt really bad about the end of, I wasn't here for it, but the end of Dave's career, because that's part of it. Who knows? But during those times, too, a lot of things played into it. DJ Allen, who was our director of marketing and a senior associate AD, was phenomenal with regards to fan engagement, with regards to creating lots of different things in Thomas Mack and so on. And remember, I'd spent 16 years at Arizona where McHale was sold out every night.
Right.
It didn't matter who you played, didn't matter when you played, it was sold out every night. So, Brian, I think you asked a really important question. The ability for TJ and his staff to have success at UNLV is really going to be somewhat dependent upon, certainly roster, but it's on fan engagement, fan involvement,
I
and
agree.
whether fans will come back. How many people last year bought season tickets but didn't attend those things.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. Okay, so you talk a little bit about the roster. Let me ask you this question, and I know it's a hypothetical, and I'm going to try to get this confirmed tomorrow, but sources told me that several UNLV players went into Francois' office, or I should say on the phone, that's what I heard, and reached out to her a few days ago and said, look, we support Mike Miller. We will stay if you hire Mike Miller. I'm going to try to get that confirmed tomorrow, but I believe it to be true. How would you handle something like that as an athletic director? If somebody comes into your office and, a couple players, and they give you a name of a coach that they really want, how would you handle that situation? And I don't want you to say put you in Francois' shoes, but how would you handle that?
Well, I think you have to listen to him. And Brian, I think the interesting part here, I was an AD for 30-plus years and really more football coaches than basketball coaches, but I hired 3 football coaches, Kelvin Sampson at Washington State, Sean Miller, who's now still at Arizona, and then Dave here. And I think the thing is, in all of those, I think you have to listen and be heard with regards to players and those kind of things, because players have a critically important part of that with regards to going forward. And again, because of the situation UNLV is in right now, and I think this is why, and what you're asking, the situation, this can't be a thing. This can't be a 2 or 3 year rebuild. UNLV's gone through that enough. That part right there. This has to be some instant. The only way that you can, in my world, be somewhat instant, is have that ability to have people who are on the roster or been on the roster. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that you always do what the players ask you to do, but you certainly have to listen to them. And I'm sure she did listen to that. And players are always going to have their particular favorites. Sometimes it's an assistant coach or associate coach who's been with the program that was very close to the players and the team, very close in terms of their recruitment. But that part of it, and that's where kind of Mike falls in, and where Ryan falls in, and things like that, because of their past association and those kind of things. And Brian, we can't kid ourselves. Whether it's college basketball, college football, any of the college athletics, it starts and ends with recruiting.
Yeah,
in terms of
I agree.
Recruiting makes good coaches great and makes fair coaches good.
I couldn't agree with you more, Jim. And you mentioned recruiting, and I know you were not the athletic director when Brandon McCoy was recruited, but I have to read this off to you, and I want to get your reaction to it. Michael Avenatti, he's been in the news lately, right? He goes on Twitter last night. You know what's going on with Michael Avenatti, right? I never thought I would say the word Michael Avenatti and UNLV in the same sentence, but I'm going to here, because he goes on Twitter last night and he says, what's the real reason McCoy, a 5-star recruit, went to struggling UNLV? What does Sean Manning, his guardian, know about it? This can't be anything positive for UNLV, right? And we don't know exactly what took place. We don't know what happened. But, Jim, when you hear about that, Michael Avenatti tweeting about UNLV, what is your reaction to that?
Well, Brian, that's your worst fear. Your worst fear is that there could be something that could happen along the lines of recruiting that could be outside the rules, outside the lines, over the lines, and so on and so forth. Because not only for UNLV and not only for athletics, that's huge for the university. And any university that's gone through it, and those that are going through it now, it's huge for it. Now, having said that, Michael Avenatti, I'm not sure that's somebody that I would take to the bank and count on the very last day of that check cashing that he wrote. And I mean that just in a very much not a suggestive way at all. So I think a lot of the facts need to come out. But the first thing I think of, is scary. Because there's all kinds of rumors flying out, all kinds of things. And I know during that time right there were a number of questions. Again, I wasn't here, but a number of questions of, that's a pretty good player to come in here. Probably could have gone a lot of places in that. But I think we need Brian to be very careful to find out. His whole background, his whole mantra, if you will, meaning Michael's, is to be a scare tactic and to throw things out and see what sticks. Does that politically. He does that in terms of the college thing now. So all of those things. But there's going to be some questions, and there's more things. Who knows? That college basketball, as you well know, is going through a really tough time right now anyway, with regards to not only things that have been said, have been taped, have been accused, and so on. And at some point in time, that'll be worked out, figured out, and solved. Because if it doesn't, the state of the game, and it needs to be about the game, and that is really going to be in a very bad situation.
And you make a good point. We don't know if Avenatti's completely 100% telling the truth, but I think we have to make the assumption that he's going to be squealing and yelling all he can so he doesn't get any jail time, and he's probably going to give I would imagine, the FBI any and all information that he has. So in the long run, do you think this is good or bad for college basketball?
Well, it's a great question. I'm not sure there's a great answer, though, Brian. I think the bigger part of it right there, it's a question that needs an answer, and we'll find out whether that's good or bad. The other thing is that we live in, you know this as well as better than anybody, that we live in a world where social media has never been faster. Somebody can say something that could be 180 degrees from the truth, and once it's out there and picked up by several different people and then passed along, it says the gospel. In other words, that's the way it happened. So I think all these things need to be vetted out.
Yeah, there's no question. No question.
In terms of Michael, in terms of his statement right there, it'll be interesting. The federal authorities, certainly the NCAA, everybody else, and those things. But I do think there has to be a waiting and really kind of understanding, because of his background has not been solid with regards to things that he said happened and then didn't happen.
I want to go back to UNLV, if I may, Jim, for just a second.
Sure.
If you're just joining us, Jim Livengood, former UNLV athletic director, great person to have on the line with us right now with everything that's going down with UNLV. If I asked you years ago when you were the UNLV director, athletic director, and I said, Jim, years down the road, a couple different coaches, we would only see 3,000 or 4,000 people in the stands, and UNLV, after Dave Rice, would not see one NCAA tournament berth, no NCAA tournament wins after Lon Kruger leaves. Would you have believed it?
Never, because of the fact, keep in mind, and I have great respect for Craig Thompson, great respect for the Mountain West Conference, but there probably has not been a period of time, particularly in the last 3 years, maybe 3.5, 4, where the Mountain West Conference has been as I don't want to say bad, but let's say not as good.
It's bad. It's pretty bad, yeah.
Well, I'm trying to take high ground on it, Brian.
Yeah.
But that's part of it. And so when you translate that in terms of UNLV, Las Vegas, the history, all those kinds of things, and then put in a setting where you're competing in a conference that's not as at its high level, then they're also. But I would have never read that. I mean, Thomas and Mack is just a phenomenal facility.
It is.
And it's an amazing facility when it's full or almost full with regards to fan engagement. And anything less is really, you're giving everybody else a chance, and it doesn't become a home court. And, nobody in the Mountain West right now is sitting back and saying, well, you know what, let's wait till UNLV gets good, and then we'll work on it. No, every program in here will be better next year. And who knows, with the exception possibly of Nevada, in terms of what Eric has coming back and those kind of things. But I think they might even be a little bit of a shocker for some. But everybody else is getting better. So the conference is going to get better. But I think you're spot on. I would never, ever would have seen a time when it would have dropped off. And I feel bad for UNLV. I feel bad for the athletic department. I feel bad for Las Vegas.
And one thing I said about Dave Rice that I always gave him credit for was he had such an amazing out-of-conference strength of schedule. And that, let's be honest, that brings fans into the building. Whether you're winning or losing those games, I think it's a positive for the university, right? I always felt like that was something that Marvin Menzies failed doing and Dave Rice was so consistent with. He played anybody, right? Right, Jim?
He played anybody, scheduled anybody, never, whenever we went through, which we did a lot, went through schedules, he never said, well, I don't want to play so-and-so, because he understood, Brian, this fact that in Las Vegas, Nevada, there are, and I'm being very facetious when I say this, there are several other activities you can attend as opposed to Rebel basketball. So that part of it has to be it has to be a great schedule. That part of it. And that's where the team and the roster and the talent level and so on, the recruits. But no, here you have to. And Dave was great about that. Dave was great about never, ever saying, well, I can't play so-and-so because, we really need to worry about this record net.
I want to ask you a really important question that has bothered me, and I think it's bothered a lot of UNLV fans, and I certainly think it's one of the reasons why Marvin Menzies lost his job. About a month ago, Jim, Marvin Menzies said that he received a plethora, I think that was the word he used, of racial epithets. And I've asked all sorts of different people about that. Nobody can figure out what he was talking about. When Stacey Augmon did not get the interim head coaching job, and they gave it to Todd Simon, who, by the way, I think is a wonderful person, and he did a great job here, and he's doing a great job at Southern Utah. Stacey Augmon's wife accused UNLV of being racist because they didn't allow Stacey Augmon for the interim head coaching position. Now, I don't believe either of them. I don't believe what Stacey Augmon's wife said, and I don't know what Marvin Menzies was talking about. So my question to you is, did you ever hear or say, or I shouldn't say, heard anybody or anything on social media or, at the university, anything that would be a racial epithet or anything racist?
Never, Brian, never. And I think that part of it right there, I think sometimes in tough positions, I'm certainly not saying this about Marvin and what here may or may not receive from that. I just think sometimes that becomes, and that's a social media thing where something is said or gets out and so on. But never during my time. Candidly, that was not ever a situation here. It wasn't ever a situation in Arizona or Washington State and so on. So I just think we are living in such a kind of fused society right now with regards to lots of different issues that are trying to be solved and being worked on with regards to race and race relations and that becomes sometimes just a kind of a shot in the dark. I'm not suggesting that was it, but Brian, your question was, had I ever? And I never. No, that was never, ever an issue.
That's good to hear, and that's what I thought your answer was going to be. Thank goodness. Jim Livengood, former UNLV athletic director. I guess moving forward now, I guess in the realm of college athletics, I want to ask you this question. It might be a loaded question. Do you think we will see a day in our lifetime where college athletes are paid? Where college athletes are getting paid money so that maybe, all these, under the table illegal activities, maybe you could throw them under the rug. Do you think that we will see that where college D1 athletes, especially basketball and football players that are making tons of money for the university, are going to be paid some sort of money and come up some sort of agreement there? Do you think we'll ever see that?
Brian, it's a good question. I'm not for paying student athletes because I believe in the amateur part of it, and I also believe in it changes the game when people are salaried employees, if you will, because that's what they become. Now, do I think there is a rationale, which a lot of people I think have had and do still have in terms of student athletes and seeing everybody else, whether it's coaches, administration, with apparel, or those things, making a lot of money? I think that is an issue. And every time you read about a head coaching salary, an AD salary, and I lived in that world, or all the kinds of things that are made, whether it's bowl games, whether it's NCAA tournaments, and I think all of those things right there lead us down that path of it's really, really hard to not seriously look at, what is in it, how do we better serve student athletes? The issue is going to be, and it has been and will be, is that part of it can't be just for one team or one group and so on. It needs to be, if it ever happens, it's got to be across the board. It has to certainly take into account Title IX, gender equity, and making sure that men's teams and women's teams are treated exactly the same. Mm-hmm. I think that part of it, we're getting closer to that all the time. Mm-hmm. The hard thing, Brian, I think this is the thing. I think it changes. In my just my opinion, I think it changes the game when we do it from that standpoint.
Yeah.
Now, will it change? Probably. I mean, look at how many things have changed in the last 5, 10, 15 years. And people have good points. I mean, how much money is being paid? I think the apparel thing will change quicker than anything else. And by that I mean the ability to have student athletes, regardless of the sport, be able to on their particular jersey, their outfit, whatever, those kind of things. I think there will be some movement in that direction quicker than the other pay-for-play thing.
Fair enough. One more loaded question for you, Jim, and we appreciate your time, and then we'll let you go. Sure. We both have a mutual friend, right? Larry Eustace. I love the guy. Yep. He's like the cool uncle I never had. I've always loved him. Legendary coach. I love the guy. Actually, I'm going to see him this weekend in Vegas. And I thought he got a really raw deal at Colorado State. Was he at times very emotional? Yeah, he's an emotional guy. He's also a winner. He never put his hand on a player. He never threatened a player. He stopped drinking, right? He quit that. He turned his life around. But he was emotional. Did he swear at players? Absolutely. Did he make players uncomfortable? Yeah, a lot of coaches do that. Name me a top coach in the country that doesn't swear at players, scream at players, make them uncomfortable. And look at what happened with Tom Izzo last week. We're talking about Tom Izzo, a legend in the game. He got emotional during a game, and then he's taking a lot of flack for it on social media. And I'm saying to myself, what did the guy do? He has a great relationship with his players. He was screaming. He was yelling. He was ticked off. So I don't want to call it the wussification, so to speak, for lack of a better term, of some of these players and some of these parents. But where are we at in society now where a parent could just walk into an athletic director's office and say, hey, this coach said the F word to my player. He called my son this or that. I want to go play somewhere else. And some of these athletic directors just have absolutely no backbone. I mean, where is the end to this, and why have times changed so much? Look, you don't cross a line, Jim. I get that. You don't put your hands on a player. You don't threaten a player. By the way, Larry never did that. Tom Izzo never did stuff like that. Bobby Knight, did he do that? Absolutely, and he paid the price for it. But where are we at now in society where some of these athletic directors, forgive me for saying it, they just don't have a backbone?
Well, I think that part of it right there, Brian, that you hit on something that if we go back, and again, I'm a big fan of Coach Knight's in terms of what he did, what he developed, so on. But had he coached in this, had we had the same visibility with regards to the number of cameras covering a game, amount of social media, it would have been very hard for him to, in some ways, survive during that time. As we move forward now, and you're exactly right, and I've known Tom Izzo for years, I've known Larry for years. In fact, I was with Larry, as you probably well know, at the Pac-12 tournament.
Right. Yep.
And that.
Yep.
Larry is an outstanding, he's turned his life around, an outstanding coach. I think he's good for the game. And I think more than anything, the biggest thing right now, and it's not a bad thing, it's just a thing, is I think there's probably a shelf life. And I think that's probably the case with a lot of coaches who either had something happen, they quit, were fired, whatever, and that there's a shelf life thing. But you're spot on, Brian, with regards to the kinds of things that now people see on TV, and it's like the picture sound bite. The old day of the sound bite. Now it's a picture bite, and how many times that's repeated of Tom in the young man's face at the game that he was coaching, talking about Izzo, those kind of things. But you know what? Part of it is too, and this will sound like an older person myself talking about it. But we are living in the era. I think we've got some great young people playing our game, meaning men and women. But we're living in an area of entitlement. And somebody says or looks at you wrong, and that, hey, I'll be in the portal tonight, not tomorrow. I'll be in the portal tonight, and that's unfortunate. If we don't get our arms around that, that's a whole other issue, Brian, that needs to be addressed, or everything, because we'll never have. I mean, that ability, and I'm not sure that we're fully there yet with regards to the ability to transfer. If it's truly a situation where somebody is being in some way maligned, or there's some things going on, not physical, but going on, that absolutely a player and a coach, then there probably is some reason. But if you look at the number of people right now that are in the basketball portal, in the football portal, it's unbelievable. And it grows. It grows by the month. So you're right. And in Larry's case right there, Larry will coach again. There's no question. He'll coach. He needs to, he wants to, and he will. It's going to be all about, in Larry's case, time and place.
I couldn't agree with you more. Jim, I got to tell you, I appreciate your honesty in answering all these questions. It's so good to hear from you, and I hope we can talk to you again soon, my man. Thank you so much for your time. It really means a lot to us. Thank you.
Anytime, Brian. Have a great night, and let's hope that go Rebels, and that it's good for UNLV and good for Las Vegas. So
that's right.
Anytime, Brian.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Jim. There you go. Jim Livengood, former UNLV athletic director. I really do appreciate his honesty because I gave it to him. I asked him some really difficult questions, and I think he gave me some great answers, and I agree with him. It is the wussification, for lack of a better term, of some of these athletic directors. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah, Larry will be coaching again. There's no doubt. I have no doubt about that. You look at the best coaches to ever coach in college basketball, or in general, in any sport, they are screamers. Many of them are yellers. Not all of them. I would say 80% of them are screamers, yellers, and they are emotional, and that is the way they coach, and they demand the most out of their players. Don't put your hands on a player. Don't threaten a player. There's certain things you can't do. I understand. Don't do what Bobby Knight did. Don't put your hands on the throat of one of your players. Don't take a chair and throw it across the gym. Treat the media with respect. I get that, but in a closed-door practice and in a game, you should be able to say what you want to motivate players. And if the players don't like it, they can transfer. They are soft, and the parents are more soft. That's as far as I put it. That's how I feel about that whole situation. I love Tom Izzo. I love Larry Stacey. The guy's like another father to me. I love him, and I know he'll be coaching again soon. Okay, so when we come back, here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk to a guy by the name of John Bruhagen. He runs this math institute, the Infinity Math Institute, also a former high school basketball coach here. So I want to ask him, of course, about the UNLV coaching decision that was made today. Also going to ask him about this scandal, this cheating scandal involved with these parents paying boatloads of money, paying for their children to get into school, and it is disgusting. I want to talk to them about that as well. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back right after this, and we will take your calls, of course, your reaction to that interview to Jim Livengood. We will take your calls at 257-5396. Again, that number to call, 257-5396, if you want to be a part of the program. We'll take a quick break. We'll be back with John right after this. You are listening to the Vegas Take on the all-new 101.5 FM, 720 AM, KDWN.